Alright, this is Teach Arts again, and my name is Amazing Grace. I'm your fashion tutor. We want to talk about factors you need to consider before you start cutting. As in, you understand you can draft, but you want to go into your fabric. Whether drafting or anything, just know that there are some things you need to know before you cut. And one of them again is a good and a consistent tape. Like I said, we don't know what a good tape is, so consistency is the word. If you are using this tape to draft, please, if you are using it, you want to use it to draft, use it to measure. And when you are sewing, also use it in cross-checking your final product. All right. So that's number one, a good and a consistent tape. Number two is that you need to iron out your fabric. Ironing out your fabric, as in proper ironing, so that your fabric don't start stretching out. You start seeing surprises when you start sewing. You'll now be wondering if your fabric is actually growing. Then number three is to check your fabric for bleeding. Bleeding. What do I mean by this? Some colors actually run, so you might need to test run before you start cutting. And this is how you do that. You use the tip of your clothes, the tip of the material you are working with. Put small water there or touch with something that has moisture and see if it will run into each other. Facts be told is that some colors will do first time running, but you will know the one that will actually bleed into each other. If you are working with a colored fabric and you are going to be mixing with whites, or you are going to be combining with white, let me use the word combination, you might need to test the two to see, because white will get you into trouble. Say if I'm working with a colored fabric and I'm combining with black and I decide to be careless, I might get away with it. But with white or any lighter color like soft yellow, you might need to actually run the two together to see how they are reacting to each other. Now we have another thing called the nepping factor. Nepping factor. And we're going to be using velvet as a fabric as an example. Now, most velvet have nepping factor. And what's nepping? A fabric will nep when you cut from different directions. I'll be using the word north and south pole here. Say you are making a dress, and the front view was cut facing north pole. And when you want to cut the back view, you face south pole. I'm sure you know what I mean by north and south. This is north here, and this is south. And when you are making this skirt, you cut placing your pattern like this. And by the time you want to cut this particular skirt, because you are probably economizing, this is the band here, and this is your band here, and you are now facing south pole. And you find out that probably because you are economizing, it happens. You find out that by the time you finish cutting, the north and the south, the back view, front view, and the back view now look as if it's two different fabric. And that's because you did not check if your fabric neps. So when we say nepping, before you cut a fabric, you might need to check if your fabric has a nepping factor. And how do you do that? You bring the knots, you bring the two ends. Can I have a fabric, sir? You bring the you bring your fabric together, and you hold the north and the south. Wow, that's big, but we'll manage it. Okay, so this is a material now, and let's assume this is a silvage, and you hold it like this, and you come to the other side of the silvage. You now bring them together like this. So this will be my north pole and this will be my south pole. You bring them together in under full light. You don't do this in a dark area. And check if the two colors are still the same. If they are not the same, it means that your fabric is nepping, has a nepping factor. But if they are the same like this one, then you don't have a problem. You can actually economize. One of the reasons why you need to check this is to avoid having to explaining to your clients why the back and the front view or whatever piece you are making that you don't have the same color, because they keep changing color. the colors tend to change with light reflection. So you might need, before you cut, when you are drafting in the fabric, to check if your fabric has the snapping factor. Number 5 that you need to check is also to check the pattern on the fabric. As in a good designer just don't cut carelessly. You can even use the pattern on the fabric as a design. Okay? So you might need to study the pattern on the fabric. Materials like stripe, we have a course like stripe manipulation, where you manipulate the stripe to form a style. You could have pictures or drawing on the fabric that you might need you to really understand, so that you don't get a result you might not be able to explain. Okay, so you need to check fabric for this pattern, and also slash the scallops. The scallop, this is also under pattern, because some clothes, let's say lace, some laces that we work with have scallops, most of them do. And I've worked with scallops that the north and the south pole are not the same. And if you don't check this out, I'll still put it on that pattern. That's why I said pattern slash scallop. You might need to look at them well to see that they are the same, or if they're not the same, you will now know what to do about it. We talked about a good and a consistent tape. We talked about ironing out. We talked about bleeding factor. We talked about napping factor. We talked about checking the pattern on your fabric. Of course, you need to obey the law of gray line. The law of what? Gray line. You don't cut anyhow. You might need to know where your lengthwise gray line is, your your crosswise gray line is, and when there is a need for you to cut across the gray. Then we also have identifying your silvage. Usually this should come before gray line for me. Your what? Your silvage. Your silvage is the factory finished edge. I actually use them as a guideline in placing my material. I'm sure it's straight. When the silvage is not, silvage for me is almost 99.8%. I'm sure it's on a straight line, 99.8%. But when it has been, I can't find my gray line there, I have to work with man-made edge. Sometimes it might be a guesswork. So, these are factors you need to consider before you start cutting. It's very important you iron out. It's very important you check your napping. Check out the patterns on the fabric. We're going to be talking more about patterns on fabrics and their names very soon. Patterns on fabric, how to go about them.